Does anyone ever move on from grief? In this video, we talk about Chadwick Boseman's widow, Simone, about continuing his legacy, and we'll also share some advice from Julia Samuel. From trending news to learning advice, we take global situations and share advice from some of the best out there. Let's jump in. Chadwick Boseman was that hero that made us believe that maybe some of these stories weren't just fiction after all. He was a hero both on-screen and off-screen, displaying heart, soul, and courage in his toughest moments. His death shattered many, but left such an impact that we can't help but be grateful we experienced the gift of his life and talent. In an interview with Whoopi Goldberg, Simone Boseman, his wife, spoke about how lucky she was to have been chosen to love him and to be loved by him in return. She mentioned that one of the hardest things for him to experience was knowing that he wasn't going to have enough time to do all the work that he wanted to do, and education was a part of it. Recently, his alma mater, Howard University, re-established its College of Fine Arts program, and they named it after him. He was only 43 years old, yet he left such a profound impact on the world. And what I'm thinking is, how does anyone move on from this kind of loss? Testimonies about Chadwick are all the same. He was an incredible man. We all saw him battle cancer for years and say nothing, yet continue to inspire people through his work and his social media. How do you move on from losing such an amazing person? Such an amazing gift? And maybe you're watching this and you've lost someone you thought was absolutely amazing too. When I asked myself this question, Julia Samuel came to mind. She is popularly referred to as a grief expert. She has an unusual wealth of experience in counseling people dealing with grief and generational traumas. She is a psychotherapist, counselor, and best-selling author of the books Every Family Has a Story, Grief Works, and This Too Shall Pass. The first tip that Julia Samuel shares about grief is that grief is something we must acknowledge. It's not something that you just fix. It's invisible, and you can't just make it better right away. So acknowledge it. Find ways of talking about it. Let people around you understand that grief is not some taboo. In her exclusive interview with Whoopi Goldberg, when asked about how she was coping with her loss, Simone Boseman said, "Some days I'm doing worse than I'm willing to acknowledge, and other days I'm doing better than I feel comfortable admitting." And I thought, oh, that's really honest. To say that some days you almost feel like you're healing, but there's a guilty part of you that thinks you shouldn't be doing well. And Julia Samuel says it's all part of grief. Both feelings are completely valid, and you must acknowledge them before you can even walk through them. The second tip that Julia shares is to get as much support as you can. Now, this always seems like the last thing on anyone's mind when they've just experienced grief. They usually want to shut off completely from the rest of the world, but Julia says that healing comes best when you're surrounded by support. Now, I understand that many people may not be able to access this support, possibly due to ignorance on the part of those around them, or maybe not even having anyone around them. She says in such scenarios, to find people to talk to. Get a counselor if you can. She also says that journaling helps because you can express what you're feeling better. The third tip she shares is one that has worked for several people. Julia says that grief is something we feel in our bodies. It's embodied as well as sort of embraced. This means that things like exercise, cycling, running, or even just fast walking help. She says this is because grief often feels a lot of times like fear. So when you exercise, it tells your body that you've moved into a fight or flight response. It eases that feeling and helps to release natural feel-good endorphins. At the end of the day, dealing with grief is a process that cannot be rushed. People must be allowed to heal at their own pace. We also must begin to educate ourselves on grief and how to cope with loved ones who are dealing with grief. What do we say to them? What shouldn't we say to them? These are important questions because the support we show is an integral part of the healing process of anyone dealing with grief. So we must do better. Thank you for watching. Do share your thoughts with me and leave a like, comment, and share.